Greetings, friends of the original Shepherd's Rod message. Are you aware of the current controversy over the charts of Ezekiel 47? Do we use the old one that's in black and white, or do we use the colored one? Is Ezekiel swimming or not? Are the marishes really dead places? And where's the kingdom in this vision? You've probably seen some of this controversy over the last year or two, especially on Facebook. But today, if you really want to get to the bottom of it and get to the facts of the matter, then please come join us as we discuss the controversy over the charts of Ezekiel 47. This is a presentation from upa7.org, and we will look at the controversy over Ezekiel 47. It's been a long-standing controversy, actually for decades, but more recently, in the last couple of years, the question is the chart, Ezekiel 47 chart found in Shepherd's Rod Volume 2, inspired, and then the newer colored version that's been published by Salem and Mountaindale and Waco, a counterfeit? Well, we'd like to know. We'll look at the evidence. Are the marishes dead places, i.e. no life? Some people are saying so. Is that really true? We're going to look at that. Is Ezekiel swimming or not? What's the Bible say? So we're going to address these issues. And then finally, where's all this confusion going? Actually, not in the best place, but hopefully we'll straighten all this out and teach only that which is published according to the rod. So please join us as we enter in. And here is the root of the controversy. We've got two different versions of the chart. The one on the left is from Shepherd's Rod Volume 2, page 294, in black and white, published in 1932. And then the later edition over here on the right, a colorized version that most of us are familiar with, especially if you studied with Salem or Mountaindale or Waco associations. So the question is one right and one wrong? What's the backdrop? There are a lot of people making a big stink about this, claiming that the one from Shepherd's Rod Volume 2 is inspired and this other one, the colored one, is corrupted. There are some differences, so we're going to look at that. But before we go there, we got to ask the question, where did that colorized one come from? I mean, in the context of Shepherd's Rod Volume 2, there's no debating on that one, but where did the colorized come from? Was it done by Brother Hadif or not? Well, here's the facts, folks. You got to take this for what it is. Those charts were published in different versions. We republished the large charts that were done in 1944, 18 of them. But there were a set of small charts given out during the hunting campaign in 1954. Dawn Adair had a set. Other Davidians had sets of those. And here's the cover page to that set of charts. And it was, the title page said, The Prophet's Pictorial Testimonies for Today. So inside were a set of 23 charts. And on the other side is the copyright page. It was copyrighted 1954 by V.T. Hadif, all rights reserved. So this is a publication under the direction of Brother Hadif while he was alive. And what's inside of there? Well, how do we know it existed? Well, here is a announcement or a notice from Symbolic Code Volume 11, number 12, page 34, published in 1956. Now, before you jump on the bandwagon and go, oh, that's part of the new codes. No, this is not part of the new code sermon addresses that we don't accept as part of the rod. This is simply an announcement of what was coming out of Mount Carmel before, under the direction of Florence Hadif. And it said, small charts available. We're glad to be able to announce that we now have on hand a new supply. Okay, they ran out and are now reprinting a new supply of the illustrative charts, 8.5 by 11. So this is the small size. On cloth, they sell for $5 a set post-paid. In paper, they're $2 a set post-paid. Each set consists of 23 different charts in a binder. Okay, so we know what the small charts were like. They were 23 of them in a binder, printed on linen, colorized, and they were all supplied to the hunters. So, has anybody seen a copy of those? Well, for many years I had heard about them. Donna Dare had a set, but I never saw them personally or got a record of them, so I was always curious. But by the grace of God, we have located a set of them and digitized them. Now, here's a picture of these charts that were in that binder. Now, there's 25 here because 2 of them are duplicates, the one on Daniel 2 and the World's History and Prophetic Symbols. Those are duplicates, so there's 23 individual ones here. So this is what we're talking about. They were in a ring binder. Now, this image came from Bashan Hill. Turns out that Bingham acquired in the early 60s, after Florence Houteff apostatized and sold out the message and left, there was a lot of literature left behind from Mount Carmel. 3.5 tons, actually, and this is documented. And I always assumed it was all literature, but it ended up in the hands of M.J. Bingham and Bashan Hill. And it included sets of charts, including the small charts. So this is evidence that those existed that were copyrighted in 1954 by Brother Houteff. Now, we can confirm this as an absolute fact, but what is interesting in that set of 23 is this colorized version of Ezekiel 47. So this is absolute proof that Brother Houteff authorized the publication of this chart. That's the facts. You have to accept it. It's not a counterfeit. Now, I'm going to go to another slideshow to show you a picture of all of those 23 charts. We were fortunate to locate it. It came from the collection of a former Davidian named Dudley Goff, who came out public a couple years ago in 2020 and was interviewed by a couple professors. And he had a book bag of original documents, and I was able to access those. And inside were a set of these small hunter charts, and we were able to digitize them. So I'm going to go to another PowerPoint and show you those. Okay, so here's a small set of hunter charts from the Dudley Goff collection. Every one digitized or scanned. 7 trumpets, and notice these are all colorized in the same color theme as the large charts, which we have digitally preserved and made available since 2010. So we'll just scan through these quickly. Here's the Daniel 8, the flood type and anti-type, 3 days in the heart of the earth, 3 days and 3 nights. So this one, lightly colored, ceremonial harvest and its significance. So these are all identical to what you see in the large charts, which were 22 inches by 28 inches. Here's the temple chart. This one's really significant because if you look at the golden bowl there, it shows only 6 tubes taking oil out of the bowl, not 7. So this is an original. Hosea 1 and 2, Zechariah 6. Notice the coloring scheme, the pink time loops. So this is consistent. It's not, this is colored according to the specifications of Victor Houteff. And this is testimony from Bonnie Smith, who was one of the 2 young ladies that colorized these charts. Here's the 7 seals, the world's history and prophetic symbols, the harvest period and close of probation, the 11th hour, Matthew 20, Revelation 7, sealing of the first fruits and the second fruits, the 7 churches, the church and the dragon, Revelation 12, the living church, woman with 2 wings spread like an eagle, the great image of Daniel 2, the harvest chart never was colored, the original was never colored. And finally here, this Ezekiel 47. So this is irrefutable proof that the colorized version of this chart was included in the small set of charts and authorized by Brother Houteff. So let's end that debate. This is not a counterfeit. This is an original. So now, once we've established this fact, then we can go back and say, well, why is it different from the earlier version? And also, let's use some logical thinking here. As the author of the message, Brother Hadif was fully authorized to revise charts. He did. We have evidence that he revised other charts, and he revised the literature, different editions. So this is not abnormal or unusual. This is perfectly legitimate. So there are some differences. And so now, once we've established that fact, you can go and compare the two side by side and seek to harmonize or understand why there might be some differences. Now, these are the remaining. Remember, it said there's 23. So the 18 that were large charts, then the 2, and then we have the cover of track 1, the Dardanelles in the Bible, a couple illustrations out of regarding the sixth seal. I think that's out of track 12. The Kingdom Illustrated, the David the Rod and Christ the Branch from track 8, I believe, and then Jeremiah 23, bringing the two sticks, Judah and Israel, back together. So that concludes those 23 small charts. So we come back here once again. This chart, colorized chart, was fully authorized and is an original. So that ends that discussion. So we come back here to the one from Shepherd's Rod Volume 2. And there are people now hyper-analyzing this and coming to some very strange conclusions about the marishes and about Ezekiel being in the river, and also the time in which the kingdom is set up. So we want to look at some of these. Really what they are is just blatant private opinions that are coming from Lennox Sam Ministry and the pre-11th hour ministry. So let's look at some of that controversy. In order to break this down, now we've done a prior video, and you can check on the link in the description box below, but breaking down all the elements, and clearly there are two sections to this vision. In Gedai, applying to the period of Seventh-day Adventist Church, and Englium to the period during the loud cry, when the great multitude come in. So under these are all symbols. You've got various elements. You've got the fountain, the altar, the temple, and the east gate. And in our prior video, we go through and define each one of those terms according to what the rod says. So this is essential. So if you're not familiar with that and like to review, then please check that link to go through all of the details of what this means, and also why we come to the conclusion or the actual evidence that fountain was opened starting in 1844. Did you know that? Well, if you don't, you really need to study the shepherd's rod and the spirit of prophecy, because there's clear evidence that it was opened as a teeny rivulet when we understand the meaning of the word water. And then the date, the first gate opened in 1930, the division between the judgment of the dead and judgment of the living. So there's the terms we'll define: fountain, altar, temple, east gate, or the threshold of the house. And so that's crucial. Now, what are some people doing today? They're going and looking at some of the scriptures connected with 144,000. And these are the two scriptures. Zechariah 12:8. It says, "In that day shall the Lord defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, and the house of David shall be as God, as the angel of the Lord before them." So you look in the context of that verse, in that day is talking about a future prophetic fulfillment when the inhabitants of Jerusalem, God's people, his chosen people, the first fruits, will be as the house of David. That's one of the names for the church, okay, at that time. And the perfect fulfillment of that will be during the kingdom period. Some people jump to the conclusion, we'll show that on the chart, where that they misplace the kingdom period. But the other two verses underneath 144,000 is Zechariah 13:1 and 2. We'll read that. It says, "In that day there should be a fountain open to the house of David, as to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, for sin and for uncleanness. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and they shall no more be remembered. And also I will cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to pass out of the land. So the question is, there's this fountain open to the house of David. The question is, when did that fountain open? And there are a lot of Davidians, especially ones that don't believe that the eastward course has anything to do with the movement of God's storehouse, hint, hint, Waco, will argue that the fountain won't be open until the kingdom. And they'll grab a reference out of 2 TG 18 to try to prove that. They selectively pull the reference and they ignore the whole context, because it obviously exposes their relocation back to Waco in 1991. Wanda Bloom and her association out in California, same thing. They dismissed that these verses only apply during the period of the loud cry, during the kingdom. Had no application today. But they're cutting short the message, because there's clear evidence that that fountain was opened first for sin, then for uncleanness. And the rod is clear about that. And if you're not familiar with that, then please check our link in the description box below, the prior video where we go break that down in great detail. The fountain was open as a teeny rivulet in Ellen White's day. That's an absolute fact. So 2 parts, first for sin, then for uncleanness. So the full opening of the fountain for uncleanness, the changing of the heart, will come in the kingdom. So there is a progressive application of this. Okay, and a lot of Davidians don't understand that. So this is crucial to understand why Brother Houteff used these verses when he was pointing out the 144,000 in that chart. So if you go up here, on the top left, you'll see the 144,000, and you'll see under that these 2 scripture references, Zechariah 13:1 and 2, and 12 verse 8. 13:1 and 2 is as an arrow straight down to the fountain, and then out of the fountain comes water like a rivulet and goes eastward at a teeny rivulet. So the question is, when was that fountain open? As I said, it's an absolute fact. It was opened starting 1844. If you don't know that, then you really need to study the shepherd's rod. And the water represents 2 things, truth and people. You can't have truth by itself. It has to have people. So that has always been the case. God's always had faithful people, starting with the rise of the Great Advent movement in 1844 and continuing on to this day. The reference to Zechariah 12 verse 8, talking about the inhabitants of Jerusalem, shows an arrow pointing just straight down and pointing to this whole portion of this anatypical temple. So the question is who are going to be the inhabitants of Jerusalem during the loud cry? Well, it's the 144,000. So it's simply identifying who those inhabitants are. It's not placing that, they're going to appear here at any point until the right time after the purification. It's interesting because some Davidians, specifically Rob Peralta from Pre-11th Hour, have grossly misinterpreted it, saying, that's pointing down and this line goes down to here to this outer court, and that's for the Gentiles, so that's during the kingdom. This is a patently false private interpretation. Number 1, look at the illustration. 12:8 goes to an arrow that points down and stops. This other curvy arrow starts here and goes around and shows the angel leading Ezekiel out towards the east gate. Those are not connected. So he's made a gross visual disconnection here and added a private interpretation on it. It's a terrible thing. Furthermore, he comes to the conclusion that he makes a parallel that this is the same as a heavenly sanctuary with the inner court and outer court. But it's not the same thing. This is a different and a typical temple. This does not have the hardware and the furniture of the heavenly sanctuary with the most holy place and the various altars and the cherubim and so forth in the inner court. So be careful. Make sure you understand the difference between the heavenly sanctuary and then this anatypical temple representing the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the latter days. And then, of course, you go out this gate, you come to this outer court, and that gate's closed. That's the east gate. It's called the threshold of the house. That's the same exegesis that you can connect to Ezekiel 9. That's where Ezekiel 9 occurs. And afterwards, you see that after this gate, the stream becomes a great river, deeper and deeper and wider, and that's the period applied, as the arrow shows, to the great multitude. This is obviously after Ezekiel 9, during the kingdom. So Ezekiel goes out to his ankles, to his loins, and then eventually gets so deep, what happens? He's got to swim ashore. Now, people will argue that, Ezekiel's not swimming. Let's look at the scripture. And let's also look at the Marishids. So these are two of the things that people grossly misinterpreting. So if you go to the colorized version, it appears to show Ezekiel out there, going from his ankles to his loins, out over his waist, and then it looks like he's swimming out there. Oh, that's proof that this chart is a counterfeit. Really? These people aren't thinking. They're bait hunters. They're jumping to conclusions. So the question, is Ezekiel actually swimming? Let's read the scripture. Ezekiel 47, 3-6. It reads, "And when the man that had the line in his hand went forth eastward, he measured 1,000 cubits, and he brought me through the waters," that is Ezekiel, "were to the ankles." Verse 4, "Again he measured 1,000, and he brought me through the waters. The waters were to the knees. And again he measured 1,000, and brought me through, and the waters were to the loins." Verse 5, "Afterward he measured 1,000, and it was a river that I could not pass over, for the waters were risen, waters to swim in, a river that could not be passed over. And he said unto me, Son of man, hast thou not seen this? Then he brought me and caused me to return to the brink of the river." The brink of the river is an archaic English word that means the bank. He brought him to the river bank. So what happens if you walk into water and it goes up over your chest? Well, then you have to swim to get out of it. So this idea that Ezekiel cannot be swimming is ludicrous. Obviously, if you get to a point where the water gets up over your head, you have to swim. What's the difference here now, comparing them side by side? In the old chart, it shows Ezekiel here moving towards the bank of the river. If it's over his head, he's got to swim. The newer version shows him swimming out here towards the sea, if that's really him. How do we harmonize? Well, think about it. They're both done in the direction of Brother Hadaf. He revised it. You choose. But don't be a bait hunter and say, well, because it shows him swimming, that proves that chart is false. That is an incorrect conclusion. Now, another argument used by Peralta and Lennox Sin people is, that new chart, I'll go back there, shows the Marishes, and they're green, they've got grass, and they're alive. But that's not what the original shows. It shows the Marishes as places where there's no life. It's dead. Really? Well, let's just go look up the words. Are the Marishes dead? Here's the verse, Ezekiel 47:11. "But the miry places thereof and the Marishes thereof shall not be healed, they shall be given to salt." Do you know what the word marish means? Well, if you don't, look it up. It's an archaic English word that means marsh. It's a salt marsh. So let's go to a dictionary and look up the word marsh. It defines it as a tract of soft, wet land, usually characterized by monocotyledons, such as grasses or cattails. If you've never been to a seashore or salt marsh, this is typically what it looks like. It's got green living monocotyledons, or certain types of grasses or cattails. So the argument that those are dead places is ludicrous. It's not based on, it just means it's a place that's stagnant. It's not growing. But don't make that as an argument to dismiss the colorized chart just because it happens to be a bit more accurate and show that the Marishes show grasses and cattails. That is correct. Scientifically and biblically correct. So be careful with people that make a mountain out of a molehill. So what can we conclude from our study here today? Well, recent controversies over which Ezekiel 47 chart to use are not based on reality, but rather imagined inconsistencies which are magnified from a molehill into a mountain. Let's be careful. Let's, stay to the middle of the road. Pitting one chart against another opens the door for private interpretations, which have been revealed clearly by Lennox Sam 11th Hour Church Movement and the pre-11th Hour Ministry with their current in-depth series on Ezekiel 47. They're trying to reinterpret it because they've relocated, they separated from Mount Dale, and now they're back in Texas. Same problem with Waco. And then they reinterpret the chart and try to place that the outer court is the time of the Gentiles, when it's like, no. The time of the Gentiles, or the time of the great multitude coming in, is after the east gate. It's clearly visible. So accept the facts about the origin of said chart. Stay in the middle of the road. Avoid those who promote their own ideas to explain apparent contradictions. So if you'd like to compare the charts, there are some subtle differences. So look at them, contemplate about it, pray about it, but don't read into it something that's simply not there. Accept the facts that both charts were done under Brother Houteff, under inspiration, and then go from there. We thank you for your time. This concludes our presentation. If you have any further questions or would like to discuss more about those differences in those two charts on this subject or any others, then please subscribe to this channel, Universal Publishing Association, for additional content. We are on the cutting edge of dealing with controversies amongst professed Davidians. Request copies of any of the documents or publications cited in this presentation in print or electronic form. We'll be happy to provide them for you. Feel free to contact us anytime. Our email here, upa5453@gmail.com. You can call, text, or connect with us on WhatsApp at this number, or visit one of our websites, yparish.org, where we address these and many other controversies amongst professed Davidians. So once again, we thank you for your time, and may God richly bless your search for truth as for hidden treasure, and to see for man whose breath is in his nostrils. Godspeed.